Hello everyone, and welcome to Sunup. I'm Lyndall Stout. Turning the calendar page to September means that wheat and canola growers are starting to think about their next crop, and so are we. Here's Sunup's Dave Deacon and our Extension Weed Specialist, Joe Armstrong.
Well, and Joe, one thing producers are thinking about is the weeds in next year's crops.
Yeah, this last year, our dockage levels, state average in winter wheat were down, which was a positive thing for grain quality, but obviously, even in those drought conditions, the weeds aren't growing very well, so that may have helped a little bit there. But going into the year ahead here, with the drought and getting that planting started is going to be a little bit tough. One thing that could be very beneficial to producers is if they get a little bit of rain, enough to germinate some weeds, but maybe not enough to plant, they can wait just a little bit longer, control all of those weeds that germinated, and then plant just a little bit later in the season, and hopefully that'll give them a little bit of a boost, knocking out that first flush of weeds.
I know you don't have a crystal ball, but if you did, what would be some of the weeds that may be problematic this year?
The grass weeds in wheat and canola, for that matter, are always going to be tough. So Italian ryegrass, jointed goat grass, feral rye, cheat, rescue grass, the list goes on. But really the best way we can manage them is timeliness. And since we have good herbicides for a lot of those weed problems, the sooner we can apply those herbicides, the better activity we're going to get. Small, actively growing weeds are much easier to control. And as well, when you knock those weeds out, you give the crop the opportunity to use the fertilizer and moisture that's available, and you'll see a more vigorous crop, which will help shade out subsequent flushes of those weeds.
And last year there was a lot of success with canola, and some wheat producers are possibly thinking about going to canola. Are there any herbicides that they need to be thinking about right now to avoid?
Some of those wheat herbicides, especially if they're applied later in the spring, maybe as a top dress type application, need to be a little bit careful and make sure that those rotation restrictions will allow for planting of canola and avoid any crop injury concerns. But a lot of our canola varieties and hybrids have tolerance to some of those wheat herbicides in the soil, so they do fit very well. Wheat and canola are excellent complementary crops in that rotation. And
if they're going from canola back to wheat, is there anything that they need to be watching for?
No, for the most part, if they're planting glyphosate resistant or Roundup ready canola, that's a very safe herbicide in terms of rotational restrictions. It has basically no rotation restriction. Some of the other grass control type products in a conventional canola, those only last for a very short period of time in the soil, and you can easily and safely rotate back to winter wheat.
Well, and Joe, since it's so dry, are there things that producers need to be thinking about as they follow up behind other crops?
Definitely. The herbicide carryover concerns, they get a little bit more magnified in a dry year. Herbicides like atrazine that would be used in corn or grain sorghum, that product tends to stick around a little bit more in drier soils. So those microbes that are using that herbicide as food in the soil, they've slowed down their activity. Now, if you've had a little bit of rain, it's going to be kind of difficult to tell based just off the label rotation restrictions. So one of the best things you can do if you're not quite sure about rotation restrictions is to plant just a strip across the field or a few patches in the field to either wheat or winter canola, and evaluate how that crop is growing. And it's kind of a crude method, but it gives you a pretty good idea of what kind of herbicide level is remaining in the soil from those previous crops. I can't stress enough the impact of early season weed control and what that does for overall yields at the end of the year.
Okay, Joe Armstrong, thank you very much.